Welcome to PKS Automation Station, all aboard, enabling team access to PKS with a Concourse Pipeline. And yes, the cheese is all mine, I accept full responsibility for it. Good morning, my name is John Paice. I'm the Senior Platform Engineer at our platform team at Dick's Sporting Goods. I've been at Dick's Sporting Goods for about 5 years. I have an infrastructure background. I've been a nerd all my life with computer programming as a child to ham radio when I was 12. So tech and doing things cutting edge, kind of been something I've been interested in for a long time. And at Dick's Sporting Goods, being able to be part of the platform team and this new ecosystem within the technology framework that we're planning at Dick's Sporting Goods, it's a really good opportunity to work there and kind of be a change agent and help out there with developers.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Vaseeharan. I work for Dick's Sporting Goods, and my role is a platform engineer. So, I'm also interested in CI/CD pipelines, automations. So, prior to this, I worked on Jenkins, and now mostly work on Concourse and manage those CI/CD pipelines. So, having said that, we'll move to the agenda.
And a lot of the work that you're going to see throughout our session is what Vasee's has been working on, so he can get all the credit for that. So basically what we're going to do to give you a little backstory to get to where we're at with our PKS journey. By the way, just to show of hands, is anyone running PKS, Essential or Enterprise? Okay, a few hands. Excellent. So yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that. I think any good story has a good backstory to kind of help you understand where we're at in our journey and how we got there and what we're doing with it. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we face as a platform team, and also maybe a couple of the challenges that we've had with PKS. We are running PKS Enterprise in our environment. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the workloads. And then we're going to get into the onboarding prereqs, and Vasee's going to do the demo to go over the Concourse Pipeline and what we've done there to help automate the process of not only the user assignment to the clusters, but also cluster creation and how we've kind of enabled all that. So our container journey kind of started about 1.5 years ago with what is now Pivotal Platform. So a lot of our product teams, development teams started out in developing with CF push. A lot of the stuff that James talked about this morning at the main stage is a lot of the same kind of thing that has affected our environment. So buzzword bingo, if you're playing out there, things like taking the monolith and strangling the monolith and doing these microservices approach to what we were normally doing was a big driver from the leadership team down and a cultural buy-in from the development teams and others to really help take the old thing and start breaking it out and making it microservices approach. So we're trying to be more collaborative across the board within product teams, within platform teams. We want to help enable them. We want to be own the product from beginning to end. We want to create our own destiny with that, with creating those products, those microservices, taking the approach of buy versus build. Again, cloud native, taking that approach. And we're encouraging our product teams for 12-factor applications so that they can run in the Pivotal platform. Also along that journey, a little ways back, we started introducing PKS, Enterprise PKS, and understand that there's a need and a good fit for that within our organization. And that's kind of where this journey has got us into, with Pivotal Platform being still a strong presence there within our organization. And a little bit of help cross-promotion within the org, and also because one of these guys doing a presentation is my boss, always felt it good to include those other stories that Dick's Sporting Goods is doing that you guys may want to be interested in. I'm especially excited about the main stage on Thursday for the multi-cloud deployment that one of our teams is going to be doing there within a live demo on the main stage. So hopefully everything goes well on Thursday, but there's some other good things to kind of go over more of what we're doing at Dick's Sporting Goods. So some of the challenges, if you will, that we wanted to kind of highlight. There's always onboarding new product teams, getting that set up, automated in a way that's possible, more and most efficient, being consistent with those results so that we can deploy clusters, deploy spaces within automation. So that's a challenge. And we want to make sure that everything that we're making changes to also is code review. We have other folks looking at what's going on within the change environment, have buy-in from security teams, kind of really get a holistic view of what we're trying to do within the platform. We want to make sure that that's advertised and shared amongst the organization as well. So some of the platform challenges. And some of the PKS challenges, so we kind of got into it early on with around 1.3, 2, 3?
3.
And so we experienced a little bit of challenges there that we've been working through. We, within our organization, don't have a lot of NSXT experience, but we're wanting to utilize that within the enterprise, and we're working with Pivotal and VMware to accomplish that now. And then some of the interfacing stuff were a little bit of a challenge, but what's also has been encouraging with the PKS stuff has been the changes within the application itself and some of the new features and stuff that have been released like throughout the PKS environment, to the point where we almost weren't going to be here because of one of the things that we did start out with a talk when doing the submission kind of changed and migrated a little bit because of 1.4. So we had to adjust a little bit as far as what we were doing. So there is a lot of really good changes going on within the product itself and iterating on the new features. So as far as PKS workloads, again, we're big on Pivotal Platform and running CF. The PKS workloads, there are some applications, either legacy or otherwise, that may not be able to fit into that 12-factor form. May not be quite as cloud native as others. If you're running an old .NET framework, for instance, or something like that, where you can run an IIS server or container and still use that old code. There are instances where being able to run that within Kubernetes environment really makes sense. So we do acknowledge that while we are encouraging most of the teams to run Pivotal Platform and get their apps there are applications where this makes a really good use case for. We have some folks running Kafka, Elk, RabbitMQ, and some other applications as well within the Kubernetes environments. So is there some of the requirements that we have for what we're wanting to do, especially around PKS? We want infrastructure as code. We want to be able to programmatically and systematically get these environments out and keep it consistent within each prod and non-prod environment across teams if we're giving access to those teams in those spaces. So we want to make sure that we can do it easily. We want it to be to make it easy to audit and make sure that we're doing what we say we're doing, make sure that we're covering everything that we should. The predefined access control. So along with that, we want to make sure that we're using LDAP, Active Directory. We want to define those work groups that we have for Active Directory groups, and we want to define that in our scope. And we want to build clusters. Again, we want to build repeatable clusters. If it tears down or we need to rebuild it, which we have done in other cases with some of the other things we're doing earlier on with PKS, we want to make sure that we can build those same clusters back and give access to the developers. And we want, it's important to us as a platform team, we're doing these Pivotal, again, we're doing Pivotal Platform and some other solutions, cloud solutions within the environment. We want to make it easy to administer the clusters from end to end, from creation to upgrade. And we're familiar with the Bosch deployed stuff with PCF and Pivotal Platform. So enterprise PKS made a lot of sense for us because it's something we're familiar with. We understand the power of Bosch and what that can do for us. So we wanted to leverage that with PKS as well. And we want to make it administratively easy on us.
Yeah, on this one, we want to empower the developers. So that's why this was kind of one of the requirement. So if you have used Pivotal platform, they are like a developer have full access within their space. Similar thing we wanted to do at the cluster level for each developer. So that was one of criteria for our solution to the onboarding.
Yeah, keep it kind of consistent between both kind of environments and enabling the developers with the power to do what they need to do to get the job done, and also hang themselves if needed. Not just kidding, but giving them what they need to get the environment done. So what we're going to talk about today with the way that we're solving this problem and the solution that we're going to do, we're going to use a cloud provider. In our case, we're doing stuff on-prem and in Azure with our PKS environment. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to use Active Directory or LDAP integration so that we can tie that into UAA for user access control. We want to use Git as the source of truth for not only the user access, but the infrastructure information as well too. We're going to use Concourse as our, we're big on using Concourse, so we're going to use it to create a pipeline and get those settings provisioned within the environment. And obviously, we're going to use PKS, in this case, Enterprise PKS.
Here, we chose Active Directory because in our enterprise level, we use AD, LDAP. So they are like onboarding or offboarding is taken care by the enterprise Active Directory. So it was easy so that we don't, day to day, we don't need to go and change the cluster access for each developer because it will be all taken care at the LDAP level. So that was another feature that we find out using the PKS LDAP external authentication mechanism.
Yeah, when we're onboarding product teams where they have a process where they're creating these LDAP groups for their Pivotal platform, and it's just easy to kind of tie that into what we're doing within PKS. So just to go over the access workflow a little bit, this is kind of referenced also or inspired from another Pivotal doc that's out there, which we'll include in at the end with some of the other links that we have. But the first level of what we're going to talk about today is basically the first and only time we're going to set up the PKS install line. It's a one-time kind of configuration. The Concourse Pipeline, or the middle section, is kind of what we're going to replicate and keep doing. Within the demo, you'll see some of that, but then that's adding new teams, product teams in the environment. We'll kick off the Concourse Pipeline and get that done. So within the first step, we're going to create and configure LDAP groups. Again, this top line is a one-time kind of configuration. For the most part, obviously adding more LDAP groups is different, but the LDAP integration itself. So in our lab, in our demo, we set up dsgtech.co as our domain with just a single Active Directory domain controller. And then we set up 3 different groups, and we're going to give those groups specific Kubernetes assignments. So we've got an operator role, developer role, viewer role assigned to those groups within UAA and then ultimately to the end user. So actually going into UAA, we're going to configure that UAA to LDAP integration, and in Enterprise PKS, if those of you who are familiar with OpsMan, in Ops Manager, there's a couple settings that we need to enable to connect our environment, the LDAP, to connect it to LDAP rather, and we added those settings here to provision any of the user groups that we're going to tie into here in a moment, or within UAA, we're going to map those from LDAP. And then we're also going to map the cluster admin role from within UAA to an LDAP group as well. So in this slide, we're going to execute this UAAC command, and we're going to map the cluster admin role to a specific group. In this case, the PKS cluster admin group within our domain.
So this is a operator role. So in this case, we are assuming that the operator will be only having access to PKS CLI, so that normal developer, they don't need to do any other activity on PKS CLI day to day. So that's what it's enabled with this command.
Yeah, so that's for us. It's our group service account to create the clusters, because we're going to create and provision the clusters for the product teams, and that's what's going to happen here. And then we're going to create that UAA service account to be able to create the cluster and give them the admin access so that our pipelines can use that account and create the clusters needed for the product teams. And that's what this slide is doing here. A couple other things that we added to our demo PKS environment. We're encouraging our product teams to use Helm for deployment of objects within the clusters. So we're wanting folks to have that as their that code to be able to deploy consistently across foundations, and encouraging them to create their own Helm charts or whatever in order to programmatically do that. So we needed to enable Tiller and a couple things. These add-ons are within the Opsman config in the section that says do not mess with any of this stuff below this. But we do that for a couple things. We do that one for Helm. We do it for the storage class. In our case, in the demo, we're deploying our environment into Azure. And then the last add-on is for our subdomains, so that the clusters themselves can resolve to the subdomain of the dsgtech.co, which is our local domain. And then all the infrastructure around PKS Enterprise is using the Azure Fabric IP stuff to be able to talk back and forth to each other within that environment.
Just want to reiterate, this step is when you create a cluster, it all will be preloaded already in that cluster, so that developer don't have to run these YAML file to ad hoc, so that it will be consistent across all the clusters for developer, for them to run Helm chart right away and go with the app running it. So that's
again, that's a great point to make it consistent and make it easier on the developers. And those are a few things that we've identified as the major add-ins that we wanted to make sure each cluster had. Then for the that was all kind of the once configuration, one-time configuration that needed to happen. And then really after that's done, then we can get into the Concourse Pipeline stuff, where we're creating the groups and provisioning clusters for those product teams within the organization. And our Concourse Pipeline looks a little something like this. That's pretty awesome. Vasi will do some demos on and show some of the pipeline stuff. But we actually have the pipeline that we are going to use for this. We have it in a repo that we're going to share out publicly. That if anyone wants to kind of look and see what we did, you could look at the code there. These values, the parameters in the Git and the PKS values, are really all that you would need to provide to be able to kind of link this up to an existing environment or whatever for you if you already have one and want to try it out or whatever. But that will be in part of the links as well after the demo stuff. So it's pretty straightforward, for the most part. Not a whole lot to fill out and to be able to run it. And with that, we will go into the demo.
Okay. So this is the pipeline that we created. So you can see here, it's connected to GitHub. So the GitHub itself this is the repository that we are going to share with you all. So I have some README files, but you can figure it out. But anyway, I'm going to walk through this. So in this GitHub directory, there are CA folder, and then these two folder, dev/demo and prod sample. These are the two directories corresponding the two environment. So in this dev directory, this is the dev environment, and there's a demo folder for the demo cluster. Similarly, under the prod, this is the prod directory, and there's a cluster called sample. So these are the two cluster we have in this. And under the CI, here's the pipeline, actual Concourse pipeline. I'm not going to go through all the details, but as John mentioned on the slide, these are the parameters needed for that Concourse pipeline. So we need a Git credentials and of course PKS credentials. So in this PKS API is the PKS API that you will specify on your opsman, and that's the one, this one. And we end up creating the username and password, even though you can use client secret also on UAA. And then this is the environment. So in this case, if we go with the development environment, it's going to be dev. If it is a prod, it's going to be prod, this folder. Then there are some couple of scripts under the template. So for this granting access to the, you go back to the pipeline. So its first step is to delete any cluster that was created on ad hoc. So if you don't specify any cluster on your pipeline, it's going to get deleted within your PKS environment. So it's required that whatever the clusters you wanted in your environment, you need to specify it here. If not, it's going to get deleted. If somebody go and manually create some cluster on the environment, that will be deleted next time when this pipeline run. And then this is the create cluster, and this is the resize. So create cluster is like if you add a new PKS cluster, for example, in dev environment, it's going to create a new cluster using this job. Similarly, if you want to resize your cluster workers, this job will do that. And then after that, once these are passed, this job grant group cluster admin. So this is the job, it grants admin level access to all the developers that specified in this YAML file. And there's another job, it grants the read-only access. So now since I have kind of gone through, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to create a new cluster, and then we can go through remaining post. So one thing I want to show here, when we started this automation, we were working on PKS 1.3 that lacked the feature of getting the configuration files to the end user. So we had a slightly different pipeline than what we have right now. So if you have running 1.3, you can use this pipeline. But for this one, we are using PKS 1.5 version. So you need a PKS CLI that you can download it here. That's what I have done it on my computer already. So if I do clusters, I'm not authenticated, so I'm just going to first authenticate. So I'm logging into the cluster as a admin. So if I do now, so this is the demo cluster that already running. So now what I am going to do is I am going to create another cluster called SpringOne. So in dev environment, I'm creating another cluster. So to make my life easier, I'm just going to copy the existing demo cluster and create another one. So so this is the SpringOne cluster. So I just need to change the details. So this is the YAML file that used to create a cluster. So in this case, we are going with the plans. So like if I can show you. So as you can see, only one plan is available, even though PKS provides there you can have up to 10 plans, I think, but we only enable for this demo purpose only one plan, that's small plan. So that's what this about. And then the cluster name. So since I copied from demo, it says demo, I'm going to change it to SpringOne. And this is the master host name. So in PKS, all the clusters are connected to the master. So I'm going to change this one also to SpringOne. And I'm going to choose, I want to have a 3 workers minimum. So that's what I'm leaving it default. And then this is the group. So whatever the group you wanted to have admin access to that particular cluster, you can define it, and you can have more than one group. So in this case, I'm just putting one group here, and that's going to be a PKS manager. And this is the group that will have a read-only access. So these 2 groups are granted by the Kubernetes RBAC feature, so role-based access control. So it doesn't really do anything at the PKS or the PKS GAA level. So anyway, I'm just saving it. Looks everything okay. So I'm just going to add to the GitHub. So I'm just pushing this new cluster to the GitHub, and now I'm going to check it on the Concourse Pipeline how it is supposed to kick off the deployment. So if I check here, yeah, now it's detected. So now it's already triggered. So now it's running the delete cluster. So if it sees any cluster that beyond what is specified on this repository, it's going to delete it. So if you see it here under the dev, now we have 2 clusters, right? Demo and SpringOne. So the SpringOne is now in progress. So now it's creating that cluster. So on average, it's take about 30 minutes. So while it's creating, I'm going to show you other things based on
while the cake is baking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So now it's in progress. So let's go back to the PKS CLI. I'm using this CLI because on my Mac I installed PKS 1.3 also. So I don't want to conflict with each other. That's why I end up using this file anyway. So now if I do the clusters, suppose so there's one already succeeded, that demo already have it, and here's the SpringOne, it's in progress. So now I just want to check if the master is created or not. So if I do this command, yeah, it's in progress, and I don't have the IP address for the master yet. So once the master is completed, it will display the master IP address. Then I will be able to create a DNS entry and connect it in the meantime, it might take a little longer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys the existing demo cluster details. So this is the demo cluster. So with this one, given that we have the 3 roles specified on this slide, so I'm going to reference this role to validate the access. So if I am as a PKS cluster admin, I will be able to access everything. So first I'm going to log in as PKS. I'm already logged in as PKS admin actually. So PKS admin. So I can see it, the cluster is running. But if I try as a developer, that's this PKS manager role and the user is PKS developer, I won't be able to log in actually here. See, it even failing to authenticate. But oh yeah, sorry. Yeah. So it's failing to authenticate, but I can get the credential as a developer. So if I do it worked. So right now I am logged in as double. Actually, I do the reader. Okay, so now I am logged in as developer. So now I can use kubectl get all, and it displays the default cluster nodes. Yeah, so it's in display the nodes. So I can log in as developer also, I mean reader. Before moving that, I just want to show you other things. But so with this developer role within the cluster, we have this role has full admin access. So I will be able to see all the cluster roles and everything. So I just want to show you that. So this is the cluster role binding that RBAC gave, and this is the role. So now if I log in as reader, so now if I try to get the cluster binding, it will error out because reader don't have access to the cluster binding. But get all will do it. So this pipeline still running. So once it's completed, it will grant the admin role to the specified group, and the other one is for the read-only access. So you can add more than one group, and the options are kind of limitless. Just have to tweak around the pipeline to make it work. And right now it's this grand cluster admin. This role is using the PKS. Oops, I need to log in as admin actually before doing that. How are you doing the time? Okay. So using this cluster admin role is the one given to the whoever the developer teams. This job does that. So, and then for the reader, it's a viewer role that it's this one. So pretty much, I think that's all we want.
Yeah, again, we give them the developer role that access so that they can deploy Helm charts or do whatever they want to within the cluster that they're allowed to. And if you had multiple teams do it within the environment that needed multiple cluster access, you could do that as well too, and then they can just log in accordingly to the cluster that they need to be able to manage it or maintain it or look at it or anything. Cool. Thank you, Vasi.
Thank you.
So we've got some of the links, some of the references that we put in some of the earlier slides, the access control list, where we got the inspiration from there, and some of the other pipeline stuff that's going on within PKS. The GitHub link, if you wanted to check out the code and deploy yourself or run with it in your own Concourse Pipeline, that'll be available. And then also too, shameless plug for the company itself. So we're always looking for good engineers and folks to write good code. And so there's a website URL for there, and there's even some HR guys walking around so at the conference too for that as well too. But we did want to leave a little bit of time for any sort of questions, Q&A around the pipeline or anything related to that, and then with any time left over, we'll give you the gift of time back with anything there. So if anyone has any questions, I think now's a good time.
What's the average lifetime for the clusters?
Average lifetime for the clusters. Right now, we've not really had to delete or remove a lot of them. With the product teams themselves, they've been pretty good as far as hygiene and everything. The update process within PKS Enterprise is really nice with the Bosch deployments to be able to handle all that. But right now, we've not had to recreate them unless there was an issue within the platform or something when we had to do that. So that's vague. You, sir.
Once the clusters are created, have you done anything to use the pipelines to deploy Helm charts on those clusters?
Have we used any pipelines to deploy Helm chart? No, we haven't yet, but we definitely could do it for sure because of the integration that we already have with the account that we set up and that Concourse is using, and the access to the cluster itself. You'd be able to do that because whenever this cluster gets created, you'll have access to do whatever for the most part. So when it's up and running.
Did you create your own resource, or is it just bash scripts that deploys it?
It's a bash script. Yeah, there's 3 tasks. It's available on the source code. You can review it. So it's pretty.
Yeah, you can. Because I think that was the last slide anyway.
So you go to PKS CI tasks. So here's a create cluster, and this is the shell script. Basically, it read that YAML file, parse it, and then create a cluster with the parameters you provided on the YAML file. So pretty much that's what it does.
Yeah, so right now, just waiting for the cluster creation time is really
Yeah.
the biggest time suck of it all.
Still creating.
Yes, sir.
You had multiple applications you were running inside PKS, and would you have multiple Concourse pipelines for each one of those?
So applications within the clusters themselves? No, what we're currently doing is creating like a cluster per product team. So if a product team will then kind of carve out their namespaces within the Kubernetes cluster themselves to deploy the applications that they see fit. So we want to give them the opportunity to be the masters of their domain within that space. And that's kind of where we've landed right now. So the product teams, and going back to how the code is laid out with all of those linked up to a product team, then they'll have their own cluster, and then they can, a lot of them, we have a few product teams that are using different namespaces for different apps within that. If they're running one Kafka or Elk or whatever, they can do that there within the namespaces.
Do you have like GitHub? So do you install like a test acceptance in production environment, or developers create it themselves, or as a namespace maybe?
The developers would create that in those environments themselves, yeah.
So within the cluster, developer has complete access. They can delete, they can remove with the admin role.
So what we're trying to encourage the product teams to do is to really, again, we're giving them the permission to do so. So they're working with security and others to, go through the process of getting their containers certified or approved within our Nexus repo or wherever they want to put it. And then they're responsible for that process to make sure that they're being compliant and doing all that stuff.
Your duty is like only creating a cluster.
Yeah.
Rest of the stuff, developers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, so the question was, we're really just enabling the cluster creation and then handing it over to the developers to be able to do the rest.
Who will take care of the CI/CD pipelines for your applications?
In our work, developer take responsibility of their CI/CD pipeline. So they have in PCF also. That's how we. No, Concourse. Yeah. So like we create in Concourse, we created a team for each develop product team. So they have complete access within that team. So they create their own Concourse pipeline using whatever the resources available. So they have full control within that. They don't need to rely on any other teams to get their things done. They take full ownership, and that's how they do.
Yeah,
So-
for us, they've been really good to be partner with, because again, a lot of this stuff is new for them and new for us as well. So they've been really good to partner with us, and if we've had to redo something, they've been accommodating to kind of help work with us on that, and we'll kind of work with them to help get them into the space that they need.
How do you educate the developers? That's like
Yeah, so the question is, how do we educate the developers? And I think we are fortunate to have a really good set of really strong product teams that have really helped in the journey, who are very motivated to develop their own CI/CD pipelines in Concourse and do those kind of things. We do try to encourage a lot of community within the organization. So we want to empower them, work with them, but also we want them to kind of go work amongst themselves and teach each other and help promote that within the other product teams.
Yeah, at the beginning we had like lunch and learn, and also we have a Microsoft Teams channel dedicated to each product. So like there's a Concourse pipeline discussion channel. So whoever has question they ask there, and other core developers they put their inputs, and then it's kind of propagates its own. Yeah, this demo is based on Azure PKS running, but eventually our roadmap is to run it on-prem using vSphere. Yeah.
Anybody else? Last call? Yes. Yeah, so the question's what's the process around cluster management as it relates to product teams and stuff, right? So earlier on with PKS 1.3, there were only 3 plans that you could choose from. So like a t-shirt size, small, medium, large kind of thing. Now you can definitely extend that out to, get the larges, the extra large, triple X. I mean, we can, a lot more options now, but we still want to try to keep it at a minimum and kind of standardize on that and use some of the other plans for other things like maybe a GPU intensive kind of plan. As it comes to product teams, we're just working with the product teams to figure out what plan they need. Most of the time, a small to medium sized plan is good, even in production. But as some of these teams extend their workload, we have had to expand it for them and work with them on trying to do that. But for the most part, we're working with them to kind of figure out their need from what they're going to need from the product perspective, and then kind of align that to a plan that we already have existing, or work with them to create a new one. Yeah.
Have you run into any relevant issues with the number of clusters?
Yeah, well, currently no. But so we don't have any upper limit issues right now. We are able to utilize currently with Azure. We're kind of keeping those lean. We're using a lot of like lower B series VMs and some other ones for non-prod and those kind of things. So we're trying to limit some of that. On-prem, obviously, it's a little bit more of a limited resource. But for the amount of teams that we're having running PKS, the cluster per team kind of works for us right now. At some point we're going to carve that out of namespaces and go with namespaces instead of clusters. Yeah, maybe, but for now, the teams that are needing the Kubernetes workloads, are doing a decent job of running pretty lean and not creating as much overhead for that.
How are you doing the backup and this fast,
The cluster backup or the pipelines? Cluster backup, it's in progress. We haven't completed. So there are we can use BBR backups. So we tried it, but we haven't really completed that portion because our priority has changed. So yeah, but this CD pipeline itself is on Git. So these cluster, all the details are on the Git, and it's kind of like a backup already. But yeah, PKS cluster itself we are not backing up right now, but there's a way to do it. We haven't done it. So it's not.
Are any of the apps running on PKS in production? And if so, what kinds of apps are those?
Yeah, so any apps in production. We do have a team we have a couple teams that are running in prod. Kafka is a big one to run in production.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the other app is that another team is doing, but we do have workloads there. But some of the Kafka Elk stuff we're looking at in Kubernetes are some of the big ticket items for us.
Yeah. Again, because of we dedicated complete cluster access to developers, they have full freedom. So we have very little visibility on what they are actually running it. We don't day to day and go on
log into their cluster and look. Yeah, that's fair. Sure.
So when we do how the customers are accessing the master APIs? Is it through IP address or are they doing
Yeah, so the question is master access when the cluster gets created, and one thing we've been working on is, as part of the pipeline, is to update DNS and then kind of have that as part of the workflow. Then that's what they'll access the cluster with DNS at that point to be able to log into the API.
Yeah, this pipeline, it assumed that there's no DNS entry. So on the fly, on the VM itself, it added it's modify the host file, put the IP address, DNS name, and do the RBAC access control to connect to the cluster. But it's another task for us. Right now, manually, we plan to integrate with our pipeline to use some sort of API to connect to the DNS server and add an entry on it. But right now, it's not. But this cluster pipeline works fine for that. So once it's created as another task, manual task. Right now, we go to the DNS server and add an entry on it.
Yeah, so the code that we're sharing is kind of like more vanilla to somebody wanted to adapt it or whatever. We were kind of going with that model. Yes?
So aside from the things that have been mentioned, for other questions, are there other aspects of PKS or Kubernetes that you're looking at automating?
Other aspects of PKS or Kubernetes we're looking to automate. Yeah, I mean, to the point of deploying some of the Helm chart, I mean, I think being able to deploy some of those things for some of the developers, I think would be helpful. Again, because we're allowing a lot of the dev teams, product teams to kind of do their own stuff within the clusters themselves, there's not really a whole lot we would do, I think, at that level, but definitely the backup process and that kind of thing is some other pipelines that we're working on to fit in to automate that as well.
Yeah, other thing, like if you're using NSXT, it's provide a lot of features that manually, like adding the load balancer, choosing IP address, all those things are part of the NSXT. So those don't need to be automated. It depends on where you are running, right? Which cloud provider. So if it is on public cloud, yeah, it need to be automated. We need to take into consideration, but if it is on NSXT, many of the things are taken care by that.
Sure.
What are you guys using for log centralization, reporting, monitoring, maintaining different operating?
Yes. So the question is, what are we using for logging and monitoring, kind of standardizing? So we're using a lot of, for monitoring, dashboarding, we're really landing on Grafana for a lot of the dashboard stuff. We're kind of a big fan of that. For logging, Elk, and those kind of things.
Prometheus exposure.
Yeah.
Mainly, pretty much all the product team that using our cluster, they have a Prometheus exporter running and then sending the metrics to our CRE teams. Yes, Bill. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you guys very much for your time, and yeah, we appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.